My name is Amadou Kanoute, and I am the Executive Director of CICODEV Africa. CICODEV Africa stands for the Pan-African Institute for Consumer Citizenship and Development. CICODEV is a member of AFSA, working on a campaign also called My Food is African. It's opportune, it's timely as a continental campaign. Speaking from the perspective of my country, which is Senegal, we import about 427 billion francs CFA. You have to divide it by 600 to get an idea of how much money in US dollars is driven out of Senegal to purchase what? To purchase wheat, to purchase milk, to purchase bread. I mean, all those essential commodities that can be grown and produced locally. But the economy of our countries is so extrovert, so much oriented towards importing that our countries get into a spiral of debt just trying to feed its people. While we are saying most of the things that we import are goods that we can produce locally. The example of Senegal that I've just given is also valid for many other countries who have been embarked in international trade on the grounds that you don't need food sovereignty. What you need is food security, meaning you don't need to grow rice in Senegal. Just get rice out of Asia. You don't need to grow wheat in Senegal. Just get it from Europe. You're more competitive in producing this good. But let the other countries who are more competitive, who have an advantage in producing those, let them produce, and you just buy to give food to your people. That paradigm has to change. We need a shift in paradigm. And that's why we are saying our local producers, we have to support them. And the best way to support them is to create an environment, legal, regulatory, for them to be able to produce foods that are grown locally, food that are produced in a sustainable manner. And that becomes a key issue in an era of climate change. Food systems cannot be strong unless we have an integrated production system, meaning you produce, you process, you transform, you consume, you manage the wastes, and then it goes back into the system. But the moment you are saying you don't need to produce, just buy from outside, the system is out of control. Our farmers, small-scale producers who represent 70% of the population, the active population in our country, will go out of work. The kind of food that we eat will be food that we cannot relate to. No identity to the kind of food that we will be getting from outside to eat. That's what this campaign is all about. My Food is African means let's work to ensure that producers, consumers, processors, distributors of goods and services, our government, our policymakers, we all think in terms of how do we make sure we invest our resources more in growing locally, things that we can control, food that we can master to ensure that we have our autonomy, that we can manage our culture in a way that our food is something that we know what it is all about. this campaign is quite opportune. In Senegal, we have been very active with many other civil society organizations to push agroecology in the heart of policy making. The government of Senegal have decided that agroecology is one of the key pillars of the key document that will guide our socio-economic policy development, which is Senegal emerging Senegal policy. Agroecology is there. Two, we've been able to advocate, to lobby as a group for a transition towards agroecology. The government has now come up, has given the mission to a ministry to promote food security. Another ministry is in charge of promoting agroecology. As a consequence of all that, we have been able to get the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Development and Equipment to agree to give now 20% of the budget that goes to fertilizer. 20% of it now goes to natural fertilizers. 5 years ago, that was something you couldn't think of. Today, we've got the attention of the government about agroecology, about producing things on a natural basis. And the war in Ukraine has just come to say, this is the right direction you need to go. Having our heads of states flying all the way to Sochi in Russia to discuss with the Russian president, to ask him to allow for cereals to come to Africa, for a continent that accounts for 60% of arable lands in the world, for a continent that accounts for more than 50% of youth, for a continent that can boast having water in abundance, land in abundance, sun in abundance, having to go and ask for cereals to be imported, to be allowed to come to Africa, is something that is not understandable. And that's where all the job that we've been doing as civil society organizations and managing to get the government's attention to say, we've heard you, we know where you're going, and we have agreed that this is the right direction, is something that we as civil society organizations in Senegal are very proud of, having such a government agreeing to do that. But now the challenge lies somewhere else. We've just had the summit, which brought together all the head African states together in Dakar, in a summit that was called Dakar 2 for food sovereignty. The idea was for the heads of states to discuss how they are going to ensure that our food systems are strong enough to be able to feed us. One of the heads of state who came as a guest was the President of Ireland, Michael Higgins. He came and advocated, saying, African government, African colleagues, please don't make the same mistake that we in developed economies have made. We've gone the wrong way with this very extensive kind of agriculture, a huge use of land, a huge use of chemical fertilizers, that please don't go that direction. Go for agroecology. Somebody flying all the way from Ireland to come to give us that lesson. Now, we've got all these countries who will be getting a lot of money from the African Development Bank, from the World Bank, and other philanthropists to develop what is called the National Compact for Agriculture over the next 50 years. How are we going to ensure that these funds, the resources that will be flowing into our countries, are used in a manner that will really help to strengthen our food systems, that will really help to strengthen our capacity, internal capacity to grow food that will help us ensure that our food systems can support our livelihood. That's where the challenge lies now for us civil society organizations. How do we ensure that we are part of the discussions, inclusiveness in coming up with those national compacts for agriculture and food sufficiency, food sovereignty? Are our countries, our states, going to make sure that their civil society organizations who represents communities are able to input into that discussion? That's the next challenge for us. If they don't want another summit, which will bring us all together in the next 5 years, then they have to ensure that the resources that will be raised on our behalf are used in a manner that will help ensure that our food system is supported, our food system is strengthened. That's the key message for our decision makers, for their partners who will be putting the money into there. While we appreciate the fact that they're supporting our governments to build those food systems, for them to be strong food systems, I would agree for once that in putting that money on the table, they say, you have to define your priorities in a collective manner. You have to define your priorities when it comes to building strong food systems. Think of climate change. Ensure when you're coming up with your national compact, ensure that the small-scale farmer is brought to the table during the negotiations. Ensure that they are given the possibility to say, why should we be doing it this way? Why don't we do it this way? And they should listen to them. Why shouldn't we, why can we ensure, or how can we ensure that the system that we'll be putting in place build on our knowledge as small-scale farmers, build on our consumption models as consumers, as citizens, who want system that they control, food that they know is good, produced in a healthy manner, in a sustainable manner, so that in the next 5 years, we are not coming back to again discuss of the soil that was destroyed, because we've embarked on this kind of agriculture which will require our farmers to use a lot of pesticides, to use huge chemical fertilizers, and we are left with a soil that is no longer healthy. That's the message I would be sending.